It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, the day I had dreamed about for years. My wedding day in Chicago was meant to be a joyful celebration of love, filled with happiness and surrounded by family and friends. Instead, it turned into a nightmare that shattered everything I believed in. The ceremony was beautiful, with soft music playing, flowers arranged perfectly, and guests smiling. I looked around, excited for the future. Tom and I had been planning this day for months, and I couldn't wait to start our life together. But as the night went on, things took a bad turn. It started when Tom's mother, Mrs. Wilson, came up to me with a serious look on her face. She was in her late 50s and always had a way of controlling the room. "Emily," she said, her voice sharp, "we need to talk." I followed her to a quieter corner, thinking it was something small, but her face was red with anger. "You've been so disrespectful today," she said, glaring at me. "You've embarrassed me in front of everyone." I was shocked. I had been nothing but polite. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to stay calm. Before I could explain, she interrupted. "Don't act like you don't know," she snapped. "You think you can just come into this family and act however you want? You're a disgrace." Tom, who had been talking to guests, walked over. He looked from his mother to me, his face unreadable. "What's going on?" he asked, already sounding annoyed. "Emily has been disrespectful," Mrs. Wilson said, raising her voice. "She's ruined the day for everyone." Before I could say anything, Tom's face twisted with anger. "Is that true?" he demanded. "Have you been causing trouble?" "No," I said, feeling hurt by his words. "I haven't done anything wrong. I just wanted to enjoy our wedding." But Tom's eyes got cold. "You've made a fool of yourself and embarrassed my mother," he said loudly, so everyone could hear. "This is unacceptable." The word hurt, but nothing could prepare me for what happened next. Tom suddenly slapped me across the face. The sound of the slap echoed in the room, and I felt humiliated. My face burned, not just from the physical pain, but from the embarrassment of being slapped in front of everyone. The room went silent, guests exchanged worried looks, but no one stepped in. Mrs. Wilson looked pleased, almost like she had won something. "You're a disgrace," Tom shouted, his voice full of anger. "I can't believe I married someone like you." I stood frozen, tears starting to fill my eyes. The room felt like a blur. I wanted to run away and hide, but I couldn't move. Tom's actions were shocking, and I couldn't believe what had just happened. The laughter and music around me felt like it was mocking my misery. When I finally calmed down, I knew I couldn't stay there. I excused myself from the reception and found a quiet corner, away from everyone. Tears flowed freely as I tried to understand what had just happened. I had always imagined this day as a dream come true, but now it felt like a cruel joke. Tom and his mother's behavior wasn't just a moment of anger, it was a sign of something much worse. The humiliation was a wake-up call, and I knew I couldn't let this be the end. I promised myself that I wouldn't stay a victim. I would seek justice and reveal the truth, no matter how hard it would be. The wedding, once a symbol of new beginnings, had turned into a turning point in my life. The pain and betrayal I felt were deep, but they also sparked a fire in me. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but I was determined to face it. This was just the beginning of my fight. In the weeks after the wedding, I felt lost. The pain of Tom's public humiliation still stung, but what hurt even more was realizing my marriage had been a lie. Despite everything, I knew I couldn't let Tom and Mrs. Wilson control my life. I needed to fight back. The first step was to get evidence. I knew that exposing them would require proof. That's when I decided to hire Detective Harris, a private investigator known for his discretion. I reached out to him, and after talking, he agreed to help me. Detective Harris, a calm and smart man in his 40s, listened carefully as I explained what had happened at the wedding and the abuse I had suffered. "I know this is hard for you," he said, "but if you're willing to work with me, we can find the truth." I agreed, feeling a little hopeful. "I'll do whatever it takes. I just want the truth to come out." With Detective Harris on my side, I started recording my conversations with Tom and Mrs. Wilson. It was uncomfortable, but I knew it was necessary. I hid a small recorder in my purse and made sure to capture every conversation. It didn't take long to realize just how manipulative and abusive they were. One night, Tom and I had a big argument during dinner. I was recording, feeling both nervous and determined. "You're so useless," he said, his voice full of anger. "Why can't you do anything right?" I stayed calm. "I'm doing my best," I said, "but you're always so critical." His response was cruel. "Your best isn't good enough," he said. "You're a burden to me and my mother. Everyone can see it." The more I listened to these recordings, the more I understood how deep their abuse went. It wasn't just about that moment at the wedding. It was a long pattern of emotional cruelty. I was more determined than ever to expose them. Meanwhile, Detective Harris was digging into their financials. After a few weeks, he came back with some troubling news. "I found some strange transactions," Detective Harris said, his expression serious. "It looks like Tom and Mrs. Wilson might be involved in financial fraud." My heart started pounding as Detective Harris explained everything. "There are large amounts of money moving between different accounts. It seems like they might be stealing money from clients." The news was shocking, but it made sense. Tom worked as a financial advisor, and Mrs. Wilson was always involved in his business. Their abusive behavior now seemed even worse. They weren't just cruel, they were committing crimes. I knew that I needed more than just these financial records to take them down. The recordings of our conversations were important, but I also needed a way to put all the evidence together. That's when Rose, my best friend, stepped in. Rose was in her early 30s, fiercely loyal and quick-witted. She had been my support throughout all this, offering comfort and strength. When I showed her the evidence, she was shocked but determined. "We have to do something with this," she said, looking at the recordings and financial records. "This isn't just about you anymore. They're breaking the law." Rose and I went through everything we had. We listened to the recordings, marking the moments of emotional abuse, and matched them with the financial documents. It was tough work, but it felt empowering. Every piece of evidence made me feel stronger. One evening, while we were going through the papers, Rose looked up from her notes. "Emily, you've already done so much," she said. "You've gathered enough evidence. Now it's time to move forward." I nodded, a mix of nerves and determination filling me. "I know," I said. "I'm ready to expose them. They need to face the consequences of their actions." Our plan was to organize a big event where I would reveal the truth about Tom and Mrs. Wilson. I wanted it to be a public event so everyone would see their lies and cruelty. The idea felt both terrifying and exciting. It was the final step in my journey from being a victim to someone who would fight for justice. As we prepared for the event, I could feel the weight of what I was about to do, but despite the fear, I was determined to fight for justice and take back my life with the help of Detective Harris, Rose's support, and all the evidence we had gathered. I felt ready to face whatever came next. The journey had been hard, but it was leading me to a big turning point. I was set on standing up for myself and revealing the truth, no matter how difficult it would be. As the day of the event came closer, I knew this was my chance to take control and fight for justice. When the day arrived, the tension was thick in the air. I had planned everything carefully, making sure every detail was perfect. The venue was a grand hall, decorated elegantly, just right for the truth I was about to reveal. I had invited family, friends, and media representatives, hoping as many people as possible would hear what I had to say. As the guests began to arrive, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. The room was buzzing with excitement and curiosity, but I couldn't stop the nerves in my stomach. Tom and Mrs. Wilson were there, standing by my side, smiling confidently. They had no idea what was coming. The event started with speeches and toasts, creating a festive mood. I played my part as the hostess, but inside, I felt like I was acting. I tried to calm myself as the moment to speak approached. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped up to the podium. The room fell silent, and all eyes were on me. I could see Tom and Mrs. Wilson exchanging glances, still smiling but looking a little curious. I paused for a moment, gathering my thoughts before I began. "Thank you all for being here today," I started, my voice steady but filled with emotion. This event was meant to mark a new beginning, but it's become something far more important. The guests looked at me, intrigued. I continued. "What I'm about to share has been hidden for too long. It's the truth behind the mask that Tom and his mother have put on." I saw Tom's smile fade as I spoke, his eyes narrowing. Mrs. Wilson's face was unreadable, but I could see the tension in her posture. I took a deep breath and pressed a button on the remote. The screen behind me came to life, showing a series of audio recordings and financial documents. The first recording started to play, a conversation between Tom and me during one of our arguments. His angry words filled the room, and the guests went silent as they listened. I could see their faces filled with shock as they heard him call me names and insult me. Then, the screen switched to the financial documents that Detective Harris had found. They showed large sums of money moving between different accounts, revealing the fraud Tom and Mrs. Wilson were involved in. The amounts were shocking, and it was clear they had been stealing. As the evidence played out, Tom's face turned pale, and his eyes darted around the room. realizing the gravity of the situation. Mrs. Wilson's face turned red with anger and embarrassment as she tried to look away. I could feel a sense of power as I spoke next. These recordings and documents show the abuse and fraud Tom and his mother have been involved in. They didn't just control me, they've manipulated and hurt many others. It's time for the truth to come out. The media in the room were busy taking notes, capturing every moment. The atmosphere shifted from celebration to shock and outrage. Guests whispered among themselves, their surprise evident. Finally, Tom spoke up, his voice shaking with anger. "This is ridiculous," he said. "These are just lies. You're trying to ruin us." But no one was buying it. The overwhelming evidence drowned out his protests. The guests, now fully aware of what was happening, started reacting with anger. Many showed their disapproval, while others expressed support and sympathy for me. The room was filled with noise, and I felt a sense of justice as the event came to an end. Tom and Mrs. Wilson tried to leave, but the media and crowd wouldn't let them escape. Their once confident appearance had completely fallen apart, and they now had to face the consequences of their actions. I watched as they realized their carefully built image had crumbled, and the truth was now known by everyone. For me, it was a moment of victory and an important step in taking back my life. The event had exposed Tom and Mrs. Wilson, but it was also a personal win for me. I had taken control of my own story and fought back against the injustice I had faced. As I looked around at the stunned faces and the whirlwind of activity, I felt a mixture of relief and determination. The days following the event were a blur of emotions and events. The truth about Tom and Mrs. Wilson had been exposed, and the fallout was massive. The media coverage was intense, and the public reaction was split between outrage and support for me. I had become a symbol of resilience and justice, but the real work was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, the media frenzy only grew. Tom and Mrs. Wilson were scrutinized from every angle, their lives laid bare for the world to see. The financial fraud charges were taken seriously, and investigations began to expose their illicit dealings. The once confident duo was now facing a legal battle that threatened their wealth and reputations. While the media focused on them, my journey was far from over. I had to navigate the legal system to ensure that the justice I sought would be served. My lawyer, a dedicated professional who had been with me throughout this journey, built a solid case using the evidence we had gathered. We compiled the recordings, financial documents, and testimonies to present a strong argument against Tom and Mrs. Wilson. The courtroom was intimidating, but I faced it with unwavering resolve. As the trial began, I took the stand to testify about the abuse and fraud. It was emotionally exhausting, but I knew I had to push through. Each day in court brought back painful memories, but also reminded me of my strength and courage. Tom and Mrs. Wilson tried to defend themselves, but their arguments crumbled under the weight of the evidence. Their attempts to discredit me and dismiss the recordings were futile. The financial documents showed clearly the extent of their wrongdoing, and their credibility shattered. The courtroom drama reached its peak when the judge delivered the verdict. Tom was found guilty of financial fraud and ordered to pay restitution to his victims. Mrs. Wilson faced legal consequences, including fines and a ruined reputation. The judge also granted me a divorce, recognizing the emotional abuse I had suffered. The victory in court was bittersweet. While it was a relief to see justice served, the process had drained me. I was exhausted but grateful. I had fought a long, tough battle, and I had won. The emotional wounds would take time to heal, but I finally felt a sense of closure and accomplishment. With the legal battle behind me, I decided it was time to start fresh. I moved to a peaceful home outside of Austin, Texas, far away from the chaos and painful memories of my old life. The new environment brought a sense of calm and the opportunity for a new beginning. As I sat on my porch, watching the sun set over the rolling hills, I reflected on my journey. It had been hard, filled with pain and obstacles, but it had also been a journey of growth and empowerment. I had taken control of my life and stood up for what was right. The support of my best friend Rose and the guidance of Detective Harris had been invaluable, and I was forever grateful for their unwavering support. My transformation from victim to victor had been life-changing. I had faced the darkest moments of my life and come out stronger and more determined. The truth about Tom and Mrs. Wilson's abuse and criminal behavior had been revealed, and I had reclaimed my story. As I looked out over the peaceful landscape of my new home, I felt a deep sense of peace and satisfaction. I had fought for justice and found a new sense of purpose. The past was behind me, and the future held endless possibilities. My story was one of strength, resilience, and justice. It was proof that even in the face of immense adversity, one could rise up, fight back, and take back control of their life. I had faced my darkest fears, exposed the truth, and come out victorious. The journey had been long and painful, but it had ultimately led me to a place of peace and fulfillment. And now, with the past behind me and a bright future ahead, I embraced this new chapter with hope and determination. I had reclaimed my destiny and proven that no matter how dark the road, it's possible to rise above and shine again.